Hello, everyone. It is Tiffany of Clarity, Confidence, Courage, Women's Empowerment. I am a women's life coach that focuses on helping heart-centered, empathic, compassionate women who have gone through a difficult divorce rebuild, redefine, and recreate lives that they absolutely love. Now, today I'm going to be talking about why it's so important after you get a divorce to really be able to define, name, and recognize your painful experiences that occurred during the marriage so that you can get the help that you need after the divorce. The reason that I bring this up is because if you cannot verbalize and you cannot define your experience, it's going to be difficult to heal and to move forward on your journey because you don't know what happened. Remember, you cannot fix what you don't recognize or what you refuse to name. Now, before we jump into this content, make sure you share, like, and subscribe. And the reason that I always stress this to my viewers is because when you share, like, and subscribe, you're helping another woman just like you find this information and start on her healing journey. So you are literally paying the positivity forward so that other women can then move forward with their lives. All right, let's jump into this content. Now, I want to give you an example of what I mean by recognizing, naming, and defining your pain. Let's say I was standing in front of you and I started doing this with my hands. I started waving my hands. I was pointing to my hands. I was wiggling my hands, but I wasn't actually verbalizing what is going on with my hand. Now, you may gather that there's something wrong with my hand, but you don't know what it is. And if I'm not saying it to myself, I don't know what it is either. But let's say I spoke out loud that my hand had a burning sensation. The tips of my fingers were tingling and starting to go numb. I had put my hand on a hot stove and I jumped back when I realized it was hot. Now I recognize I burnt my hand. And now that I've recognized and verbalized the experience, I probably can deduce that I need to find a burn specialist, a doctor that specifically focuses on hands. You see what I did there? I was able to recognize that my hand was in pain. I described the pain. I even talked about what I believed caused the pain, the stove. I remember the sensation when I put my hand on the stove. Now I can use critical thinking to say, okay, I went through that experience. I probably need a doctor who specializes in burns and probably who has had some experiences dealing with burned hands specifically. See how I made that connection? And see how it led me to getting the help that I need? That's what I mean when I say recognize, define, and name the pain that caused the trauma or caused the circumstance that got you in the situation that you were in. You cannot move forward if you don't recognize it, if you don't describe it, if you don't name it for what it really was. You can't find the specialist or the help that you need in order to move forward. So that's why it's so important that after you get a divorce, you can recognize your name, what the pain is. You can actually write it out or verbalize it to another person. You have to understand what caused the pain. Like, what was the thing? Like, name the events. What specifically happened that caused you to be in that specific type of pain? And from there, you can find a therapist or a coach that specializes in that specific issue to help you move forward. So here's another example, a real example. Let's say you were married to someone who was emotionally neglectful, meaning he never spoke to you when he came home. It was poor communication. He rarely came home right after work. When he was home, he totally ignored you and your children. He was always on the phone. He never asked you how your day was. Nothing was ever talked about. It was a lot of emotional neglect. And when you did go and you did try to talk to him about your emotions, he shut you down. And let's say you did counseling and you went to retreats and you did all the marriage stuff and nothing changed. His behavior did not change. If that happened, in that description, you could probably recognize a pattern there. But let's take it a step further. Now that you've been able to verbalize that you were emotionally neglected by your spouse, where else in your life have you been emotionally neglected? Maybe your father behaved the same way. Maybe there was a childhood situation that you can tie to your adult relationships. And maybe every guy that you dated since you were a teenager behaved the exact same way. They were all emotionally neglectful. Now you can probably see why you feel insecure, why you feel anxious in relationships, why you have low self-esteem. Because your father, along with all the other men in your life, were all emotionally neglectful. And it gave you a level of anxiety. So now, because you have recognized it, you defined it, you've named it, you've connected patterns from childhood, now you can probably find a therapist that can really help you hone into that. Someone that is truly focused on anxiety and low self-esteem and, anxious attachment style and childhood neglect. See how I did that? See how that works? That is the reason why you must be able to actually verbalize your emotions. See where they come from in the present, in real life. So that's the first part. Recognize, define, and name. Now, I want to talk about the second part. And this part is just as important. The second part is about using language and defined terms to recognize your experience. So actual terms. So in the example, I just talked about the word neglect. Do you know what neglect means? Do you know what the definition of neglect actually is? Have you ever looked up the term neglect? Well, if not, I'm about to tell you. Neglect means failed to care for properly, as a state of not being cared for. And that can be physically not being cared for, mentally not being cared for, or emotionally not being cared for. Now, do you know what the term abuse means? Abuse means cruel and violent treatment of a person or an animal. That's the actual definition of abuse. And the thing about abuse, there can be different types of abuse. Some types of abuse are physical abuse, meaning your physical body. Verbal abuse, someone verbally using their words. Psychological abuse or emotional abuse. Sexual abuse, financial abuse, discriminatory abuse. Neglect or acts of omission. Yes, that is abuse. When you are neglected, that is a form of abuse. So these are all terms that help you to describe what you experience. And the reason this is so important is because, again, if you cannot name your experience, how do you know how to fix it? If you have never read the book, Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft, I highly recommend it because it really digs deep into the mind of an abusive man and how you can accurately define your real lived experience. In order to move forward, you have to do these things. And it seems tedious, like, Tiffany, I got to talk about what I went through. I know it was bad, but what does bad mean? What does that look like? Now, some other words to become familiar with is dysfunctional. What does it mean to be in a dysfunctional relationship? Maladaptive. What is maladaptive behavior? What does maladaptive behavior look like? Toxic. That word is thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? Inappropriate. Inappropriate behavior, inappropriate touching, inappropriate language. What does that mean to you? Because what might be inappropriate for you may not be inappropriate for someone else. How do you define these terms? It's important to get familiar with what you may perceive as negative terms so that when you start on your healing journey, you can say, okay, I was abused. This is the definition of abuse. That's what happened to me. Now I need to get a therapist who specifically focuses on abuse victims, trauma victims, whatever it may be. Now, I know you may be saying, well, Tiffany, my ex-husband was a great father. He was, man of the year at his job. He was a great friend. Even though he mistreated me and he was abusive to me, I don't want to call him bad. I don't want to say he was bad. Listen, at the end of the day, verbalizing trauma and calling it for what it is does not mean you're trying to demonize the other person or say that he was a bad father. He was a great father. He was a great coworker, and he was abusive to me as his wife. You can do that in every situation in your life. You have the right to say, my childhood was okay. My family did the best that they could, but I was in a traumatic situation when I was a child. There was some alcoholism, or there was some drug addiction, or there was some neglect. I was physically abused. I still love them, but that's what I experienced. The point of saying this is because two things can be true at the same time. You could have been married to a man who was a great father, and he was an alcoholic, and he was neglectful to you, and he was a poor husband. You could have had a father growing up that at work he was great. In the community he did a lot of things, but he was emotionally abusive to your mother. He was neglectful to you and your siblings. See, two things can be true at the same time. And you may even still love your father. You may even still love your ex-husband, but cruelty is cruelty. And you must call it out in order to validate your own lived experience, not to embarrass people or put people down, but for you to be able to say to yourself, I experienced something that was harmful to me, my self-esteem, my emotions, and I need help. This is what happened. This is what it left me in. This is the shape that it left me in. These are the words, and I'm going to then find somebody to help me specifically for this. Doing this will help you really recognize red flags early on in life in general, so that if you decide to get married again, if you decide to date again, you can quickly see that behavior pattern. You can recognize it for what it is, and you can call it out for what it is. This person is making me feel uncomfortable. Their behavior and their language is inappropriate. They are violating my boundaries. They were verbally abusive. I did not like the way they treated my dog. I did not like the way they spoke to the waiter that waited on us. They were being demeaning, and they were traumatizing that person. You need to be able to verbalize those words, because part of doing that will help you, again, to recognize red flags so that you don't have the same experience and repeat the same pattern over and over and over again. And so that as you navigate this world, you can feel safe. Now, I know that was a lot, ladies. I hope that was a helpful video. I hope you understood this concept of recognizing, verbalizing, and defining your real life lived experiences, validating your emotions for yourself so that you can then find a therapist that can help you on your healing journey, or a coach that can help you on your healing journey. Now, as always, be willing to share, like, and subscribe. Pay the positivity forward to other women. Make sure you also get your hands on my free gift, Empower Boundaries Workbook. The link is in the description. It'll teach you about verbalizing your boundaries, saying no, how to verbalize, and so much more. And you'll be on my newsletter to get all the deets for when I release my upcoming course, Thrive Beyond Divorce. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.